Welcome to The Explainer. I am absolutely thrilled to have you here today. We are about to take a seriously fascinating journey right into the biological machinery of your own mind. Think about it. Every thought you've ever had, every single memory you cherish, and every time you learn a new concept or teach someone else a brand new skill, it all originates from this incredibly complex, beautifully orchestrated biological foundation. And today, well, we're going to unpack exactly how that hardware actually works.
86 billion. That's the estimated number of neurons inside a human brain. That is literally more than there are stars in our galaxy. Just take a second to let that sink in. You have 86 billion individual processing units working together right at this very moment, just so you can hear and understand the words I'm saying. This massive, intricate network is going to be our starting point today.
So here's our roadmap for today. We'll start with the cellular hardware, then move into the action potential, synaptic transmission, the chemistry of behavior, organizing the supercomputer, and we'll wrap up with hormones.
Section 1. The cellular hardware, building blocks of the brain.
Think of a single neuron kind of like an information processing factory, and it's got 4 distinct zones. First up, you have the dendrites. These branch-like extensions act as the input zone, pulling in messages from other cells. Next is the soma, or the cell body. This is the integration zone where the cell's DNA actually lives, and it takes all those inputs and decides what to do next. Then we have the axon, which is this long tube acting as the conduction zone to carry electrical signals away from the cell body. And finally, the signal reaches the terminal buttons. That's the output zone, which releases chemicals to pass the message right along. But here's a wild detail for you. Those 86 billion neurons, they aren't working alone, not even close. They have an equal number of support staff called glial cells. You've got astrocytes, which are these star-shaped cells that regulate the chemical environment and bring in nutrients. Oligodendrocytes and Schwann cells are absolutely vital because they produce myelin, which is a fatty insulation wrapping around the axon to speed up electrical signals. Then there's microglia. Think of them as the microscopic cleanup crew for the brain's immune system, constantly clearing out debris. And finally, radioglia, which act like scaffolding to guide newly born neurons to their correct destinations while the brain is developing.
Section 2. The action potential, spark of the mind.
Now, the way these cells communicate is incredibly dynamic. When a neuron is just hanging out, it sits at a resting potential of negative 70 millimolts. It's primed, right? It's ready to go. Then comes depolarization, where a stimulus pushes that electrical charge toward a critical threshold of negative 40 millivolts. Once it hits that invisible line, boom, step 3 is the spike. Voltage-gated channels fly open, and positively charged sodium just rushes into the cell, creating a sudden electrical spike. And almost immediately in step 4, repolarization kicks in. Potassium rushes out of the cell to restore that negative resting balance. This rapid shift in voltage basically races down that axon we talked about earlier.
The absolutely crucial takeaway here is the all or none law. An action potential doesn't just happen halfway. It either fires at complete 100% strength or it doesn't fire at all. It acts exactly like binary code in a computer, just ones and zeros. And remarkably, the size of that electrical spike doesn't fade or diminish as it travels down the axon. It stays powerfully consistent from the very start to the finish line.
Section 3. Synaptic transmission, the chemical handshake.
So at the very end of the line, that electrical signal hits a literal roadblock. It encounters the synapse. This is a tiny microscopic chasm between the sending cell, we call that the presynaptic membrane, and the receiving cell, the postsynaptic membrane. The electrical spark literally cannot jump across this gap. Instead, it triggers the release of chemical messengers that float across the space. And this is where the real magic of communication happens.
When those chemicals lock into the receiving cell, they trigger one of 2 reactions. They can create EPSPs, which are excitatory. These depolarize the receiving cell, basically acting like a green light, making it way more likely to fire off its own action potential. Or they can create IPSPs, which are inhibitory. These hyperpolarize the cell, acting like a red light, making it much less likely to fire. The receiving neuron is essentially doing some really complex math right then and there, adding up all the green and red lights to decide its very next move.
Section 4. The chemistry of behavior, neurotransmitters, and psychopharmacology.
These chemical transmitters are pretty much the invisible architects of your daily life. Right at the top is glutamate. This is the brain's primary excitatory transmitter. If you're trying to teach someone a complex new skill or you're trying to learn a new fact from this explainer, you are relying heavily on glutamate to form those new memories. Then there's GABA, the great inhibitor that keeps your overall brain activity calm and balanced. Acetylcholine handles muscle contraction and REM sleep. Dopamine, that's all about movement, attention, and that deep, satisfying sense of reward and reinforcement. Serotonin steps in to regulate your mood, your eating habits, and your sleep. And finally, norepinephrine keeps you vigilant and totally ready for those sudden fight or flight responses.
Understanding these everyday chemicals allows us to really grasp psychopharmacology, or how drugs affect our behavior. Because drugs basically just play tricks right at the synapse. Agonists are the helpers. They act like a chemical key that perfectly fits into a lock, mimicking or boosting a neurotransmitter, which is exactly what a drug like L-Dopa does for dopamine in Parkinson's patients. Antagonists, on the flip side, are the blockers. They basically stick a piece of tape right over the keyhole, completely blocking the neurotransmitter from doing its job.
Section 5. Organizing the supercomputer, nervous systems and brain geography.
Now, if we zoom out to the highest level, your nervous system is neatly divided into two main branches. You have the central nervous system, or CNS, which includes the brain and the spinal cord. Think of this as your executive command center, securely locked away inside bone. Then you have the peripheral nervous system, the PNS. This is the massive, expansive network of nerve relays outside the skull and spine that communicate messages between that command center and the rest of your entire body.
Within that peripheral system, you actually have an autopilot system called the autonomic nervous system, and it's split into two totally fascinating halves. The sympathetic division is your emergency response. It prepares your body for fight or flight, making your heart race and pumping blood to your muscles when, say, you get jump scared. Juxtaposed to that is the parasympathetic division. This is your rest and relax mode, and it takes over when the danger has finally passed, facilitating things like digestion and energy conservation.
And if we look at the brain itself, the literal crown jewel of the CNS, it is highly compartmentalized. You have the forebrain handling complex processing like the cerebral cortex and limbic system. The midbrain handles foundational routing in the tectum and tegmentum, and the hindbrain is keeping you alive and coordinated via the pons, cerebellum, and medulla. Because this organ is so incredibly vital, it has evolved some major protective systems. It's wrapped in 3 layers of tissue called meninges, it literally floats in a shock-absorbing cerebral spinal fluid, and it's guarded by a semi-permeable shield known as the blood-brain barrier that actively keeps toxins out.
Section 6. Hormones, long-distance messengers.
So we've talked about neurotransmitters, but hormones are a whole different ballgame. They are also chemical messengers, but their method of travel is entirely different. Instead of jumping a microscopic gap between 2 specific cells, hormones are secreted by endocrine glands directly into your bloodstream. The bloodstream acts as this massive, sprawling highway, allowing these chemicals to wash over the entire body, creating widespread and really long-lasting effects on your behavior, your stress levels, and your physical state.
What's really interesting is how we categorize the work these hormones actually do. They have organizational effects, which happen early in development. These are permanent, structural changes to the brain and body. They literally organize the hardware itself. Contrast that with activational effects, which happen much later in adulthood. These are reversible changes in your behavior triggered by sudden hormone surges, like a temporary spike in stress or dominance, activating the hardware that's already built and waiting there. We have covered a massive amount of ground today, from 86 billion individual neurons firing binary action potentials, to neurotransmitters like glutamate helping us teach and learn, all the way up to the brain's vast geography. But I really want to leave you with this final provocative thought. If every memory you cherish, every time you teach a friend something new, every emotion and every single conscious thought you have is ultimately just the result of sodium ions rushing into a cell and chemicals crossing a microscopic gap, who is the one doing the thinking? It's a profound mystery of consciousness that sits right on top of this biological foundation. Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer. Keep wondering, and I will see you next time.